Hello, my name is Juan David Ramirez Echeverri, and I'm going to talk about some verb tense. This is one of the most important tense because we use it for talk about the present, and we are going to see some examples for explain it.
The affirmative phrase is composed by subject, that in this case is I, verb, that in this case is she, and the complement that is all the rest. In the negative phrase, we only have to add a don't or doesn't before the verb, or another auxiliary. The structure to make a question is the same that the affirmative phrase, but we have to add a auxiliary before the subject. And finally, we have to add a question mark.
The present continuous is used for talk about actions that are happening right now, and it is different to present simple for one reason that I'm going to explain using examples.
I chose this phrase because in this moment I'm making a video about verbal tense. The structure is the same that simple present, but we only have to add an ing to the verb. As I said before, the present continuous and the present simple have the same structure, but in the negation phrase we have to add an auxiliary before the verb and an ing in the verb. The structure to make a question is composed by the auxiliary, the subject, the verb using ing, and the complement, but finally we have to use a question mark. We use simple past to talk about any action that started in the past and finally in the past. The structure to make a affirmative past phrase is subject, that in this case is I, verb in past we have to use ed, or with some verbs is totally different, and finally we have to use the complement, that is all the rest. To make a negative past simple phrase we have to use an subject, an auxiliary verb in negative, the verb in simple present, and complement. The structure to make a question in past simple is composed by the auxiliary in past, subject, verb in present, and finally the complement using the question mark. The past continuous is used for a lot of situations. For example, in case that you want to talk about a situation that was happening, or you want to talk about a situation that was interrupted by another. The structure is composed by subject, the auxiliary that could be was or were, that it depends of the subject, the verb in present and using ing, and finally the complement. The structure to make a negative phrase is composed by subject, the auxiliary in negative, that could be weren't or wasn't, the verb using ing and in present, and finally the complement. The structure to make a question in past continuous is composed by auxiliary, that could be was or were, the subject, the verb using ing, and the complement using question mark. The past perfect is used for describe any situation that happened before another, and the verbal tense define it. Also, the verbal tense define which situation happened before and later. This phrase is composed by two phrases. The first one is composed by a subject, the auxiliary, the verb in past or past participle, and the complement. After that, we have the second phrase that is in simple past. It has the same structure, but we only have to change the auxiliary or had or has for the auxiliary in negative. The structure to make a question is composed by had, subject, verb in past participle, complement. After that, we have the phrase in simple past. The past perfect is used for talk about situations that have been happening in the past. It started in the past and until finish in the past. The structure is composed by subject. After that, we have to add been and the verb using ing, and finally the complement. In the negative phrase, the structure is the same that affirmative phrase, but we have to change the had to the had in negative, hadn't. And finally, to make a question, we have to change the position between the subject and had. And finally, we have to add question mark